Home is in many ways a game I've been waiting to play for a long time. It's been staring at me from my crowded Steam library for a full 3 years at this point because, well, I guess I was just waiting for a situation like this in which to play it. The game was billed as a unique horror adventure with a twist. It's essentially a murder mystery, so if it didn't have a twist, there would be rioting in the streets. Your character wakes up in the midst of a murder scene, seeming to have only taken place hours ago. Everything that happens in the confines of play takes place over the course of a single night, that much we know. The progression of play is essentially the act of taking a cursory glance over the elaborate case that we are apparently wrapped up in. With our character having no experience in forensics or tactics of investigation, we are pretty much left to our own mental devices to make our own assumptions about what happened along the way until we find the answer. The game is short, only about an hour or so long, which suits the branching nature of the game, as it encourages multiple playthroughs. Along the way, the player is faced with decisions to make, and some minor path branching, offering different or more information depending on how thorough a particular playthrough winds up being. Of course, the game is very careful not to tell you too much. All we know for sure is what we find, where we found it, and if the player character is able to assign any context to it, such as who an object belongs to. Anything the character doesn't know is presented as a question, really driving home the idea that our protagonist, who has an identity, so it's not strictly speaking you in the game, knows about as much as we do. There's no dialogue between characters in this game. Specific information is given to us in the form of thoughts or musings from the protagonist's mind, presented in cutaway text screens, not unlike those you might find in old silent films, with the blank backgrounds and even the borders around the text. It fits really well, as we are sort of playing a silent film in some ways. There's no talking, because we are perfectly alone, and the sounds that we do hear seem to be amplified, as if our hearing is always way too accustomed to the silence, and everything is a shock to the senses. Home is a very cerebral game, to the point that I see a lot of people writing it off as too deep for you, walking simulator, and whatever else have you, but I'm not really sure I'm so ready to dismiss it that quickly. The magic I find here is in how the game is essentially painting a picture for you to look at and see more of as the game goes on. If you're not connecting with it or letting the game pull you in, then you might not see it, but I certainly did. The crushing loneliness, the lack of music, your echoing footsteps, it all drives the meta-narrative of this game so well that I found myself getting taken away by it both times I played through the game, and that's saying something. There is of course the problem of gameplay janks ripping you out of the experience, and sure enough there are a few. I did not play the game with a controller. In retrospect, I probably should have, and when choosing a yes or no answer to a question the game posed, well, I don't know what's wrong, but it's like the actual buttons are moved to the left of the options themselves. If you're too far to one side of yes, it will select a no, and I can select as far away as this distance to get a yes answer. This definitely created some problems early on when I was trying to tell my character to press a hidden switch, but each time he returned an answer that basically added up to no. I just assumed the character was making a decision as part of the plot. Several times I tried this and it was the same result, so I assumed I hadn't triggered the proper event yet or something, until the one offhand time I tried it again and found out that I had to click the blank space out here to get the yes answer. Man, I spent way too long in that spot. And then, don't you know, for some reason my character started doubling on the screen. I don't know if this has some philosophical or mechanics as metaphor significance to it, so sorry if I spoiled it. Let me know in the comments, maybe, whatever. All I know is that I had to reinstall the game to get it to stop doing that. Those issues aside, I think the game accomplishes its mission. The lack of stimulation or excitement present in the game is balanced nicely with mystery and atmosphere. The lead up to the end of the game certainly had me on the edge of my seat, even if it was a bit predictable in the moment. What happens in the ending itself is a point of contention for some people, but I'll say that I enjoyed it. It requires a bit of mental travel to get to a point of interest, but if you know me, I wound up there without much trouble. And since I'm there, well, let me just say, the ending, wow, really had me thinking. I'm pretty dang close to just out and out saying that the ending is both the best part of the game and its greatest weakness, but I'm not really sure if that serves this review at all. I debated whether or not to go on from here because this is supposed to be a quick thing on video and I want those to be as spoiler free as possible, but I couldn't stop thinking about that ending, and I don't know when I'll have another time to bring it up. Whatever. If you want to hear my deeper thoughts on the twist and such, keep watching, but be warned, spoilers and all that in 3, 2, 1, here we go. The big twist in Home comes from the fact that you, the player, decide what happens. You are the final piece of the puzzle, specifically in the moment when the player finds the place where the body of the protagonist's wife may or may not be. The first question is this the body of my wife? And we go on from there. The game then lets us wander around the house re-examining all the evidence we found along the way and coming to a final decision on what we think it all means. It's all very ambiguous and doesn't really leave you with a solid answer to the story, but I still found it intriguing. The linchpin of all all of it being how long it took me to finally decide if it was in fact the body of protagonist's wife or not. I had an immediate reaction, sure, but when I started going over all the reasons why my brain wound up there, it made less and less sense. I've played other games like this. Of course it was me that killed her and all of the other dead bodies lying around. They aren't seriously gonna try to pull a "and I would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for your meddling kids" ending on me when I find out it was the mailman all along, will they? After all this? The final assumption the character comes from the case that you, the player, have built based on the evidence. It's kind of remarkable how vague what actually happened remains at the end. Was it a frame job? Did we do all this while sleepwalking? Is your wife leaving a trail of bodies for you to find? It's almost like the game takes place inside the player's head, and the significance of the narrative is born purely out of our assumptions and biases. It's a murder mystery that demands that the audience figure it out for themselves. I decided to hit up message boards to see what people have said on the game, and it sounds like I'm not the only one who had the wheels turning in the old noggin after the credits finished rolling. If you indeed skip the spoilers, let it be known that they basically add up to "the game really made me think." And as I've always said, if that's the least I can say about a game, then it was a huge success. I think mechanically the game could stand to be a bit more solid, but at $3 on Steam, there's no reason not to tack it on to a larger purchase during the Halloween sale and have yourself a Halloween night filled with creepy mystery and psychological intrigue.